This morning's Torah reading, the story of Yaakov Avinu, Jacob our father's sojourn in Haran, is bookended by two dreams. Yaakov, it is said, had an idyllic childhood. The Torah says he was an ish tam, yoshev ohalim, a simple boy who liked to spend time at home. The Midrash takes us even further and says, no, he was actually a student in a beis medrash. He was a little yeshiva bacher, rather sheltered from the world. As he flees to Haran, he lies down to sleep and has a vision. His dream is one of the most profound encounters with the divine recorded in biblical literature. Angels ascending to and descending from heaven. Even God himself appears to Jacob in his dream. Yaakov awakens and makes a conditional vow to God. If you protect me on this journey, kol asher titen li, everything that you give me, aser aserenu lach, I will tithe. And the Talmud says, aser esrenu, the double eser, means 20%. Yaakov will give 1/5 of his fortunes back to God. Yaakov then arrives in Haran and spends 20 years there building a family and quite a portfolio. Vayifrotz ha'ish me'od me'od. Yaakov grew exceedingly wealthy. Vayehi lo tzon rabot, he owned large flocks, ushvachot, and female servants, va'avadim, and male servants, ugmalim, and many camels, v'chamorim, and many donkeys. After 20 years in Haran, Yaakov has his second dream. This is what Jacob himself recounts of this dream in the 31st chapter. I looked up and saw male goats mating with the flock that were streaked, speckled, or spotted. The angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob. I answered, here I am. And the angel says, look up and see all the male goats mating with the flock that are streaked, speckled, or spotted. I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar, where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. In his first dream, Yaakov sees angels. In his second dream, Yaakov sees sheep. And instead of ascending on a ladder heavenward, the sheep are ascending to mount other sheep. Then an angel says that God has seen everything that Lavan is doing to him, and get out. Get out of the land and leave. What is the meaning of this second dream? We tend to focus on the first. What was it that Lavan was doing to Yaakov that God saw? And why does that mean that Yaakov has to now leave and go home? I would submit that the entire life goal of Lavan the swindler was the acquisition of material goods. Yaakov had to not only work hard to try and accumulate wealth, but he had to occupy himself with the fear of Lavan trying the latest trick to swindle him. Thus, Lavan managed to make Yaakov engage in an all-consuming pursuit of the material, both when he was working and when he wasn't working. Lavan was always in his head. Once, this Yaakov was dreaming of angels. But once he started dreaming of sheep, it was time to go home. The pursuit of the material had colored Yaakov from the outside to the inside. And so Yaakov leaves Haran and heads home. God reminds Yaakov of the vow he made. Remember, Aser Asrenu Lach, your 20%? Remember all those years ago? But even though he is now rich, Yaakov tarries and delays in fulfilling his vow. The Midrash says that as a result of his delay, the whole incident with Dinah, the terrible incident with Dinah, his daughter, occurs. One must wonder, after all that Yaakov had been through, after all that God had done for Yaakov, Yaakov flees his home with nothing but a staff in his hand. He now comes back incredibly wealthy. God saves him from Esav. God saves him from Lavan. Why does he hesitate in fulfilling his vow, in giving God what he said he would? I would suggest two explanations that are probably connected. The first is that accumulating money has the power to warp the way we think. When Yaakov left Haran with nothing, he understood that whatever he would acquire would be coming from God. At that point, the idea of giving away 20% was the psychological equivalent of playing with house money. It's not real. But after Yaakov works really hard, day and night, week after week, for many, many years in terrible conditions, he fell prey to the temptation of believing that his own brains and his own abilities were what made him rich. And all of a sudden, it became much harder to part with that 20%. The second explanation is that studies of the brain using imaging explain something that the Harvard Business Review coined as the power paradox. The power paradox asserts that when people acquire power or wealth, their brains change. And many of the social qualities that allowed them to rise in the first place to their position get lost or weakened. And one of those qualities is empathy. Before one rises, one sees herself as connected to others. But afterwards, that connection is lost. It is thus no surprise that studies indicate that poor people tend to give a higher percentage of their income to charity than wealthy people. It also is no surprise, then, that this is Moshe's primary fear in Sefer Devarim, his final address to the Jewish people, the last book of the Torah. In Parashat Eikev, Moshe says, "You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me, but remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms His covenant, which He swore to your forefathers, as it is today." And that repeats over and over again in Sefer Devarim. Moshe's fear, you're going to enter the land and think you did it all yourself. People become wealthy and then they assume that they deserved it, they earned it, and it is theirs. And those who are poor are also getting what they deserve. This is the avodah zarah, this is the idol worship that Moshe is most worried of. Its ancient incarnation was Sdom. Remember Sdom? The Mishnah in Avot says, "Sheli, Sheli, v'shelach, shelach, zo midat Sdom." The one who says what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, that is Sdom. And its modern incarnation is what they call the prosperity gospel in some Protestant circles, or Ayn Rand, or certain strains of conservative economic thought for non-believers. I'm not saying that the Torah subscribes to socialism. That same Mishnah also says, Ha'omer sheli shelach v'shelach sheli am ha'aretz. Only a fool would say that what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine. The Torah presents a vision that is neither capitalist nor socialist. It is probably best described as regulated capitalism with a very strong communitarian bent. And also, Judaism has no problem with people who become wealthy as long as they've accumulated their wealth in an ethical way. But the expectation of one who manages to accumulate wealth is to remember these words of Rabbi Jacob ben Asher, the famous 14th century halachist, who said this in his introduction to the Torah. Let the offensive thought never enter your head, he writes, that you should not give charity to the poor because it will make you less wealthy. Know that your money does not belong to you. It is a trust. You are a trustee. It is God who is the grantor. He entrusts wealth to you to do what He commands, which is to share it, especially with the poor. This is true whether you're worth $1,000, $1 million, or $1 billion. The Talmud says even a poor person who is sustained by charity must give tzedakah. I shouldn't say charity is tzedakah. Tzedakah is not charity. It's deeper. Maybe the best English translation for tzedakah is social justice. Tzedek, social justice. Tzedakah is a philosophy. It is a way of life. It is a way of relating to people, a way of relating to the material world. That's social justice, tzedakah. And it is an ethos that runs counter to our culture, which is vacuously materialistic. Today, the temptations of turning away from tzedakah and turning towards the material and the consumerist and the hedonistic is great. Lavan, the person, might be long gone, but Lavan's approach towards the world has never been more popular, never been more pervasive than it is today. When we choose to spend money on things, do we step back at all and consider whether these are necessities or luxuries? And does it make any sense to expend our resources, and even more importantly, our time, to acquire them? Many of these luxuries are meant not only to give us utility, but to have some bling, to show it off. Not just to give us pleasure, but to attract the attention of others. Like, for instance, the kinds of simchas that we make. I think that one of the lessons that we should learn from COVID, but I fear we will not learn from COVID, is that weddings and b'nai mitzvah need not be lavish affairs. They actually could be a fraction of the size and a fraction of the cost and be even more beautiful. Think of the message our bling broadcasts about our values, particularly the message it sends to our children. The younger generation today, ladies and gentlemen, is growing up in a very different world than their parents and grandparents. I don't know if we all appreciate that. Today's Canada is not the same. This is a Canada where economic prospects are bleak, income opportunities are narrow, and the cost burdens of living here are crushing. Forget the luxuries. Let's just talk about the basics. Let's talk about food and shelter and clothing. It is becoming increasingly difficult for many young people just to survive in this city. And to have the additional burden of meeting the many material expectations of our community, it just seems to me like adding insult to injury. We talk a lot about inclusion in this community. Inclusion of those with physical disabilities and mental disabilities, and those of different genders, and those of different sexual orientations. This is all very important. But when is the inclusion Shabbat for people, for families who are struggling financially? I'm not talking just about people who are poor. I'm talking about people who are stressed and anxious about their financial obligations, who are struggling to make ends meet. What have we done at Beth Tikva to make ourselves more welcoming to those who have financial struggles? We certainly have not made any changes to our membership model. No wonder so many people and so many families are drifting away from Jewish life. In the Mishnah Torah, Maimonides writes, we are obligated to be more careful in fulfilling the commandment of tzedakah than any other commandment. Any other commandment. You're going to check your lettuce for bugs? Spend more time thinking about social justice in your life. What have we done to work for social justice in our community? Where have we sometimes shown restraint so that others can benefit, and other times shown generosity so that others can benefit? Have we practiced the kind of selfless giving that makes us worthy of this trust that God gives us, called wealth? What are our children dreaming of? Are they dreaming of angels, or are they dreaming of sheep? Measure how we're doing by the dreams of our children. Twice in his lifetime, Yaakov offers a mincha. That doesn't mean he davened. A mincha in the Bible is a gift or an offering. The first mincha that Yaakov offers is for his brother Esav. It's just as he is entering Israel. Even though, as I explained earlier, Yaakov had a hard time letting go of his hard-earned money, he does so to avoid an obvious danger. But Rashi says when he gave that mincha, he gave it beka'as. He wasn't happy. He was angry. He gave, but reluctantly. But later in his life, he's now 130 years old. Yaakov offers a second mincha. Anyone know when this happens? The circumstances of his life are very different. At 130 years old, he's pretty old. But also by now, life has not been very kind to him. His true love is gone. She predeceased him by many years. His family, a dysfunctional mess. And because of the famine, his wealth has proved rather useless. Now the viceroy of Egypt has asked for his last remaining treasure, Binyamin. And Yaakov decides to comply. He offers the viceroy a mincha. He says to his children, "Take the best fruits of the land. Take an offering, some balsam, some honey, some gum, some labdanum, some pistachios, some almonds. Take double the money I gave you last time and all the money that was returned to you." Yaakov sends these gifts not in anger, but in acceptance, even in generosity. What's happened? What happened to the cheapskate? Perhaps at this stage in his life, Yaakov has finally unburdened himself of Lavan's idolatry. He has learned that when you have enough money to live, money is not so important. 130 years old, but his money will not buy him back his youth. It won't put his broken family back together again. It can't even make food appear when a famine takes hold. The gold and the silver that he worshipped for all these years has turned out to be a false idol. And in the irony of ironies, these beautiful gifts were actually gifts for his own child. The viceroy of Egypt is Yosef. We often think that by not dispersing our money, we are somehow helping our children, saving for them, so that they have an easier life. But here, the Torah teaches us that a greater gift we can give our children is that of a community where who you are is not related to the sum of your bank accounts or the prestige of your profession or the bling you own, but a community where every person is valued and respected and included and belongs simply because they are created in God's image. This was the real mincha. This was the real gift that Yaakov gave at the end of his life. True, it was a gift for Joseph. But if we are wise enough to understand its meaning, wise enough to understand the implications for tzedakah that this gift represents, I think it might be a great gift for us too. Shabbat Shalom.